I stood outside that hotel room for what felt like forever, unable to breathe, unable to move. Their voices came through the door in low, easy laughter, the kind shared by two people who felt safe together. Then I heard Dorian say her name softly, and something inside me went still. I did not need to see more. That one moment told me everything my heart had refused to believe. I walked back to my car in the rain with shaking hands. My chest hurt so badly it felt like grief had turned physical. Part of me wanted to run back inside, scream at him, drag the truth into the open right there in that hallway. But another part of me, colder and clearer, told me not to. If I faced him now, he would lie. He would cry. He would twist the story until I doubted myself. No, I needed time. I needed control. By the time I reached home, I had made my first real decision. Dorian would not know that I had found him out. Not yet. I would look at him, speak to him, and live beside him as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The woman who had driven to that hotel hoping for an explanation was gone. In her place was someone quieter, harder, and no longer afraid of the truth. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee I never drank. I kept hearing that laughter in my head. It did not sound like a mistake. It sounded familiar, practiced, comfortable. That was the part that hurt the most. This was not something new. It had been going on long enough for both of them to feel at ease. When Dorian came home, he looked tired in the exact way a liar thinks a tired man should look. He set down his bag, loosened his tie, and kissed my forehead like he had done nothing wrong. I let him. I even asked if his trip had gone well. He answered smoothly, without pause, and I realized how dangerous he really was. He had rehearsed this. Maybe not the words, but the lie itself. He had been living in it for a long time. I smiled when needed. I listened. I moved through the morning as if my world had not split open the night before. But inside, something had changed shape. My pain was still there, raw and heavy, but it was no longer wild. It was focused. I began to understand that silence could do what anger could not. Silence let me watch. Silence let him feel safe. And safe people make mistakes. After that morning, I stopped looking at Dorian like a husband and started looking at him like a problem I had to solve. I paid attention to the small things. The way he checked his phone and quickly turned it over. The way he stayed too long in his study with the door closed. The way he kept asking me to sign papers without giving me time to read them properly. One evening, while he was upstairs, I went into his study and opened the locked drawer he never let me touch. Inside was more than I expected. There were unpaid bills, bank papers, and letters with hard, threatening language. I found a notebook filled with numbers, dates, and initials. I did not understand every detail, but I understood enough. Dorian owed a lot of money, and not to the kind of people who waited patiently. Then I saw Lowen's name in one of the papers. That changed everything. She was not just the woman in the hotel room. She was tied to this mess in a way that made my stomach turn. Dorian had not only lied to me in love. He had been using my trust to protect himself. The house, the savings, even my name had been pulled into something dark without my knowledge. That was when I understood how far this really went. I needed someone smart, careful, and outside Dorian's control. That was why I went to Gideon Wren. He had known my family for years, and he was the kind of lawyer who noticed details other people missed. I met him alone and brought only a small set of papers at first. I wanted to be sure before I said too much. He read everything slowly, then asked for more. When I showed him the rest, his face changed. He explained that Dorian had been moving money in ways that could leave me responsible if things fell apart. Some signatures looked pressured. Some documents were written to confuse me. A few could have trapped me in serious legal trouble later. Hearing it from Gideon made it real in a way nothing else had. He told me to leave the house as soon as possible. I understood why, but I was not ready to disappear and let Dorian control the story. I wanted proof. I wanted every lie, every paper, every hidden move placed in clear order so he could not charm his way out of it. After that, my days and nights became separate lives. In front of Dorian, I stayed calm and familiar. Behind his back, I copied files, saved records, and built a quiet case against him piece by piece. Each document brought me closer to the moment he would have nowhere left to hide. Living with Dorian after that felt like acting in a play I never wanted to join. I cooked dinner, sat across from him, and watched him lie with calm eyes. He seemed more relaxed now, almost pleased with himself. The more normal I acted, the more careless he became. He started leaving small gaps in his stories. A dinner that lasted longer than it should have. A business meeting with no clear reason. Calls he ended the second I walked into the room. I noticed everything. A florist card with no name. A receipt from a jewelry store tucked inside his car. Then one afternoon, while looking for insurance papers, I found a folded note. It was short, but every word mattered. Aloan had written that he had promised it would be over soon. I read that line again and again. It did not sound like two people lost in some foolish affair. It sounded like pressure. It sounded like a deadline. I began to feel a different kind of fear. Until then, I had been focused on betrayal. Now I was thinking about danger. I no longer believed this was only about Dorian wanting another woman. Something bigger was moving around me, and I was standing too close to it. From that point on, I was not collecting proof just to expose him. I was trying to protect myself before whatever they planned was complete. By then, I understood the role Dorian had given me in his mind. I was supposed to be the wife who trusted first, asked questions later, and forgave without making trouble. He had built his lies around that version of me. Aloan seemed to believe in that version too. That was why I needed to see her face to face. I learned she often attended a small gallery in the next town, so I went there one evening and waited. When I saw her, I walked over with a calm smile and introduced myself. For 1 second, her eyes changed, but she recovered quickly. She was composed, polished, and far too controlled to be careless. We spoke like two strangers making polite conversation. We talked about the paintings, the weather, and people we both claimed to know. But under every word, something sharper was moving. I was studying her, and she was studying me. I saw no shame in her. No fear either. What I saw was impatience, as if she believed I was the last closed door between her and the life she wanted. Then she smiled and said Dorian often mentioned my kindness. I smiled back, but inside I felt cold. In that moment, I understood something clearly. Both of them had counted on me being gentle. Neither of them had imagined what a quiet woman could do once she stopped believing in love. The first crack appeared unexpectedly. While Dorian was away, a man came to our door, claiming to be a business associate. His questions were careful but sharp, probing me about Dorian's finances, repayment plans, and recent business deals. He asked if I knew about certain property issues tied to a failed investment. I answered calmly, letting him think I was confused, but I was listening, learning more from his pauses than his words. Every question, every glance revealed the danger that had been quietly building around me. After he left, I sat alone at the dining table, tracing the polished surface with my fingers. This was where Dorian and I had planned simple lives together, vacations, family, a future that now seemed meaningless. I realized how deeply his lies had embedded themselves in every corner of my life. That night, Dorian returned home. He was unusually attentive, watching my expressions closely, touching my shoulder as if trying to find out what I knew. I smiled softly, told him I was tired, and moved past him. Inside, I was far from tired. I was calculating. I was deciding the precise moment and method to turn all these cracks into a collapse he could never recover from. I decided to use the dinner as a stage for what had been quietly building for weeks. 6 people were invited: Dorian's business partners, a neighbor who remembered everything, Gideon, and Lucille, a pianist who had little patience for Aloan. I wanted everyone to see clearly what had been hidden. Dorian was thrilled, thinking it was just another normal evening. Aloan came too, dressed in dark silk, her face polite but annoyed, like she had been forced to attend. The first part of the dinner went smoothly, soft music, candles, laughter, polite conversation. No one could guess what was coming. When the moment was right, I rose and calmly placed a small pile of papers by Dorian's plate. There were receipts, transfers, altered documents, and records showing his lies. I spoke quietly, without anger, letting the papers speak for themselves. One by one, eyes widened, and the room went silent. Dorian tried to mask it with a laugh, but it failed. Aloan froze mid-motion, her hand hovering over her glass. For the first time, Dorian looked like what he really was, not charming, not confident, just exposed and frightened. The quiet, careful evidence did more damage than any argument or confrontation ever could. Once the papers were on the table, everything moved quickly. Gideon did not need to explain much, the documents spoke for themselves. Dorian's business partners, who had once respected him, now saw him as reckless and careless. The neighbor confirmed seeing Aloan's car near our house when I had been away, and Lucille shared what she had overheard. Aloan had boasted that a certain wife would soon be out of the way. The accusations began to fly. Dorian tried to blame Aloan, and she turned on him in return. Within minutes, the careful image they had built of a secret alliance shattered completely. Panic replaced confidence, and their calm facades crumbled. I watched quietly, letting every word, every glance, do the work I had planned. By the end of the night, Dorian had lost more than his charm. His credibility was gone, his lover's loyalty vanished, and his business associates no longer trusted him. He realized I would no longer shield him from the consequences of his actions. I had not raised my voice, not shouted, not cried. I had only let the truth unfold in front of everyone, and that alone dismantled the life he had tried to control. It was quiet, precise, and complete. Within a week, I left Dorian. I did not fight, I did not argue, I simply walked away. With Gideon's help, I secured what remained of my money and made sure my name could not be dragged into his problems. Aloan disappeared too, leaving town quietly after people began noticing her connections to Dorian's lies. Dorian tried to reach me. He sent letters filled with apologies, excuses, even blame. He blamed stress, temptation, debt, anything but himself. I read them once, then set them aside. I had already seen the man I loved was only an image, a mask hiding who he truly was. That mask had finally fallen, and I did not intend to put it back on. In the months that followed, I understood something about revenge. It is not always about ruin or spectacle. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to hold the pieces of someone else's life together. Dorian had built his lies relying on my love, my patience, my trust. When I stopped supporting him, the life he had depended on began to crumble. I walked away from the wreckage he had created, not entirely innocent, not untouched, but finally free. For the first time I belonged only to myself.